Welcome to Calm Bedtime Tales channel. Tonight we step behind the thick stone walls of Dover Castle in the winter of 1217, where a great blizzard is about to transform a powerful fortress into a quiet world of snow, shadows, and survival. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to wake inside a medieval castle when the sea vanished beneath frozen mist and the wind seemed determined to shake every candle from its holder? What did ordinary people eat, hear, smell, and fear while storms covered the land outside tonight? You will walk through that frozen fortress and experience the hidden routines of those who lived there. So, before you settle into the story, take a second to like the video and hit subscribe. And while you listen from your own quiet corner of the world, comment your location and local time below. Location plus local time. Now, dim the lights. You step closer to the old castle gates as the winter wind begins to rise around you. The first thing you notice is the cold pressing gently against your face as you approach Dover Castle. The air tastes salty because the English Channel lies nearby. The waves below the cliffs crash with a steady rhythm. The sound reaches you even before you see the fortress. You're standing in the year 1217 during a time when castles are more than homes. They're symbols of authority, military strength, and survival. Dover Castle rises above the landscape like a stone guardian watching the coast. Its enormous walls hold rooms, kitchens, chapels, storage areas, and sleeping quarters for many different people. The snow begins as small flakes drifting through the grey sky. They settle on the paths around you. The horses shift uneasily in their stalls. The guards pull their cloaks tighter. Nobody complains too loudly, because medieval people are already familiar with discomfort. Still, everyone notices the weather. A winter storm in the 13th century is not simply an inconvenience. It can interrupt travel, delay messages, and threaten supplies inside Dover Castle. Every person understands that preparation matters. The fortress must continue breathing, even when the outside world becomes silent. You walk through the entrance and feel the change immediately. The wind becomes softer behind the walls. The smell of smoke from burning wood fills the passageways. The scent of damp wool follows you as servants and soldiers move around with heavy winter clothing. The castle feels busy, but not rushed. People know their tasks. A servant carries firewood toward the kitchens. A soldier checks a doorway for drafts. A cook examines stored food carefully. The ordinary rhythm of medieval life continues beneath towering stone. Dover Castle had been strengthened by earlier rulers, especially during the reign of King Henry II, who transformed it into one of England's most impressive royal fortresses. Its position near the coast made it extremely important for defending the realm. In 1217, the castle was also connected to the political struggles following the famous events of the Magna Carta period. Yet history is not only made by kings and battles, history is also made by the person sweeping a floor before sunrise. It belongs to the worker carrying water through freezing halls. It belongs to the child trying to find warmth beside a kitchen fire. You begin to notice these quieter lives. The stone beneath your feet feels uneven and cold. Your footsteps echo through narrow corridors. Somewhere nearby, a wooden door creaks as the wind pushes against it. The castle seems almost alive, making small sounds as it settles into the storm. The great keep stands above you, massive and practical. Its thick walls provide protection, but they do not create comfort easily. Stone remembers winter. It holds the chill long after sunset. Even wealthy residents must find ways to bring warmth into their private rooms. A small fire can become a treasure. A dry blanket can feel like luxury. A warm meal can become the best moment of the day. Historians still argue whether medieval winters were always harsher than modern ones, or whether surviving records simply make certain extreme seasons appear more common. The weather patterns of the 13th century are still studied through many clues, including written accounts and natural evidence, for the people inside Dover Castle, though the question is simpler. The storm outside is real. The cold is real. The snow gathering along the walls is real. You can imagine a guard looking across the white landscape and wondering how long the blizzard will last. You can imagine a servant counting sacks of grain and hoping supplies remain enough. You can imagine a child pressing a hand against a frozen window and watching snow cover the world beyond. The castle contains many surprises. One quirky detail of medieval fortress life is that rooms were not always used exactly as we imagine today. Large halls could serve many purposes, including eating, meeting, celebrating, and sleeping. People adapted spaces constantly because every area had to work hard. Nothing inside the fortress exists only for decoration. Every object has a purpose. Every room has a role. As the afternoon fades, the snowfall becomes thicker. The cliffs disappear behind a curtain of white. The sea and sky seem to merge into one endless grey shape. Inside the castle, candles begin appearing along the walls, creating small islands of golden light. You move deeper into the fortress and listen. You hear voices. You hear footsteps. You hear flames. The storm may surround Dover Castle, but life continues within it. Medieval people did not wait helplessly for winter to pass. They worked, talked, cooked, prayed, and rested while the weather ruled the outside world. Tonight, you will discover that a castle is not only a monument of stone, it is a collection of human moments. It is the tired soldier warming his hands. It is the cook preparing another meal. It is the family gathering close to a fire. It is you, walking quietly through the frozen corridors, noticing the small details that centuries of history often leave behind. The snow keeps falling outside. The walls stand firm. The night approaches slowly over Dover, and inside this fortress, the long winter begins. You step away from the inner halls and move toward the outer reaches of Dover Castle, where the fortress meets the frozen edge of the sea. The great blizzard continues to gather round you, covering paths, rooftops, and fields with a pale blanket of snow. The wind moves across the cliffs with a low, steady sound, as if the entire coastline is whispering beneath the winter sky. The castle feels different from this height. From the battlements, you can see how carefully the fortress was placed above the surrounding land. Dover Castle was built on a commanding position overlooking the English Channel, allowing those inside to watch approaching ships and movements along the coast. The height offers protection, but it also exposes everyone to the full force of winter weather. You place your hand against the stone wall. It feels icy. The rough surface beneath your fingers carries centuries of cold mornings, rainy evenings, and stormy nights. The builders who created this fortress understood that strength came from thick walls and careful design. They knew stone could resist enemies, but they also knew stone could become a difficult companion during winter. The blizzard pushes against every opening. Small gaps around wooden shutters allow thin streams of cold air to enter. Workers move through passages wearing wool clothing layered over simple garments. The smell of smoke from fireplaces mixes with damp fabric, and the earthy scent of stored materials. Life here is practical. There is little wasted effort. A castle like Dover cannot afford disorder during severe weather. Every person has a place in the daily system. Soldiers protect the walls, servants maintain the rooms, craftspeople repair damaged objects, cooks prepare meals, stable workers care for animals that provide transportation and labour. You notice how the fortress operates almost like a small village. Hundreds of people may depend on one another inside the walls. The castle is not only a residence for powerful figures, it is a complicated community where survival requires cooperation. The Great Keep rises above you, one of the most impressive structures within the castle. Its massive square shape dominates the landscape. Inside, rooms are arranged for different purposes, including living areas, storage spaces, and places for important gatherings. You enter through a heavy doorway and immediately feel sheltered from the worst of the wind. The sound changes. Outside, the storm roars across the cliffs. Inside, the noise becomes distant rumble. You hear footsteps on stone floors and the occasional crackle of firewood. The atmosphere feels calmer, although everyone remains aware of the weather beyond the walls. Medieval castles often depended on careful storage because winter could create serious challenges. Food supplies needed protection from moisture and pests. Grain, salted meat, dried fish, and other preserved foods helped communities survive periods when fresh supplies were difficult to obtain. You pass storage areas where the careful planning of previous months now becomes valuable. The people inside Dover Castle are not simply waiting for the storm to disappear, they're relying on decisions made long before the first snowflake arrived. A farmer who delivered grain months earlier becomes part of this winter story. A worker who repaired a wooden barrel becomes important. A person who stacked firewood correctly becomes essential. Small actions carry great weight. Historians still debate how extreme individual medieval winters truly felt for different communities, because surviving records often focus on unusual events rather than ordinary weather patterns. Some written accounts describe severe conditions, while other evidence suggests that experiences varied greatly depending on location and resources. Inside Dover Castle, your experience depends on the walls around you. The fortress offers advantages that many people outside do not have. You walk past a chamber where candles flicker gently. The light moves across the stone surfaces, creating soft shadows that seem to dance with the storm. The smell of beeswax fills the room. The warmth is limited. But even a little comfort matters when the world outside is frozen. The wealthy residents of the castle have more privacy and better clothing than many others. However, medieval comfort is still very different from modern expectations. There are no heated floors, no easy source of constant warmth, and no quiet escape from the demands of daily work. Even the powerful must respect winter. A lord or a noble person might have finer meals and larger rooms, but cold remains cold. Stone does not care about social rank. You continue through the fortress and notice details that reveal ordinary habits. Wooden containers sit near working areas. Tools rest against walls. Wool fabrics hang nearby, waiting to be cleaned or repaired. The castle is filled with objects that show people were constantly maintaining their surroundings. One curious detail about medieval castles is that some rooms could have surprisingly flexible uses. A space used for meetings one day might serve another purpose later. People adapted because large buildings needed to support changing needs throughout the year. The idea of a castle being completely formal and silent is mostly a modern imagination. In reality, Dover Castle would have been full of movement. You hear conversations from different corners. Some voices are serious because the storm creates concerns. Other voices are lighter because people still find moments for humour, even during difficult weather. Humans continue sharing stories and making each other feel less alone. The blizzard creates a strange kind of closeness. People who might normally pass each other without conversation now gather near fires. Workers exchange news. Families spend longer hours indoors. The weather outside changes the social world within the walls. You look through a narrow window opening and watch snow gathering on the rooftops. The white landscape stretches toward the sea. The cliffs appear softer beneath the snow, but the cold remains powerful. The fortress stands between nature and human life. It cannot stop the storm completely. It can only provide shelter as evening arrives. Lamps glow brighter along the passages. The castle prepares for another night of wind and freezing temperatures. Guards take their positions. Servants complete their final tasks. Fires are checked before darkness fully surrounds the walls. You remain inside this remarkable fortress, listening to the sounds of medieval winter. The sea below continues moving. The snow continues falling. The stone walls continue standing, and within those walls, hundreds of people continue living their quiet lives beneath the great storm. You wake before sunrise inside the great keep, where the first sounds of the castle slowly rise around you. The storm has not disappeared during the night. Wind still presses against the walls, and snow continues gathering along the narrow windows. The darkness outside feels endless, but inside the fortress, another day quietly begins. The room around you is cold. You pull your wool covering closer and listen to the faint movements beyond the doorway. Someone is already walking through the corridors. A servant carries supplies toward the kitchens. A guard changes position after a long night watch. The castle never truly sleeps because too many lives depend on constant attention. You step into the passage and feel the chill beneath your feet. The stone floor steals warmth quickly, reminding you that medieval buildings were designed for strength rather than comfort. Your breath becomes visible in the colder areas, and the smell of smoke from distant fires slowly guides you toward the busier parts of the keep. Morning inside Dover Castle follows a familiar rhythm. People wake according to their duties. The nobles rise later than many workers because their responsibilities are different. They must oversee decisions, receive visitors, and represent authority within the fortress. However, even their mornings involve practical concerns during a serious winter storm. You enter a larger chamber where servants prepare the space for the day. The fire has been carefully maintained through the night. Fresh wood is added, and sparks rise into the air with a soft crackling sound. The warmth spreads slowly, almost reluctantly, across the room. Nothing happens quickly in a medieval castle. A meal requires preparation, water requires carrying, fire requires feeding, clothing requires cleaning and repair. Modern people often forget how many invisible tasks create ordinary comfort. You watch as attendants move through their routines. Some carry wooden vessels, others arrange tables and prepare simple items for the morning meal. The sounds blend together into a gentle pattern of work. Conversation and footsteps. The smell of baking bread begins to appear. It mixes with the scent of burning wood and the damp wool of winter clothing. These smells become part of castle life. creating memories that sort of followed people for years. A person raised within these walls might remember winter mornings through the scent of smoke and fresh food more than through written words. The Great Keep was not simply a home for rulers. It was a working environment where many people contributed to daily survival. During the reign of King John and the years following his death, Dover Castle remained an important royal stronghold, especially because of its strategic location and connection to conflicts over English power. Yet beneath those major events were ordinary mornings like this one. A child waking beside family members, a worker checking supplies, a soldier preparing equipment, a cook beginning another day. You walk toward a smaller chamber where some residents gather for warmth. Conversations are quiet because the morning is still young. People discuss the weather, the condition of roads, and whether messengers will arrive despite the snow. Everyone watches the storm. Weather controls the pace of life. A clear day might allow movement between settlements. A severe blizzard could isolate communities for many days. Inside the castle, people must balance patience with preparation. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced colder conditions during every major winter, or whether surviving accounts mainly preserve memories of unusual storms. The medieval climate was complex, and different regions experienced different patterns. For the people inside Dover Castle, however, every snowfall outside their walls demanded attention. You notice the small details of their morning habits. Some clothing appears carefully repaired rather than replaced. Wool is valuable because it provides warmth and lasts through difficult seasons. Leather items are maintained because materials cannot simply be discarded. A quirky detail from medieval domestic life is that wealthy households often use scented plants and herbs to improve unpleasant indoor smells. Without modern ventilation, people relied on natural fragrances, including herbs placed around living spaces, to make crowded rooms feel fresher. Even a powerful fortress had ordinary problems. The castle was impressive, but it was still filled with people. You continue through the keep and observe the different ways individuals begin their day. Guards check weapons and clothing before taking their positions. Workers organize tasks that may change depending on the storm. Children follow adults through the halls, learning by watching rather than through formal instruction. A young person growing up here would know the castle almost like a second body. They would recognize every staircase, every doorway, and every room where warmth could be found. The fortress would feel enormous to visitors, but familiar to those who lived within it. You pause near a window and look outside. The snow reflects the pale morning light. The sea below remains hidden behind clouds. The world feels quiet for a moment. You understand the strange beauty of this frozen place. The storm creates isolation, but it also creates a rare stillness. The castle inhabitants are surrounded by hardship, yet they are also surrounded by a powerful landscape that few people today experience in the same way. The morning meal eventually begins. Food is served according to position and availability. Different people receive different portions, reflecting medieval social structure. The hierarchy of the castle appears in many small details, from seating arrangements to responsibilities. Still, everyone shares the same winter air. Everyone hears the same wind. Everyone depends on the same walls. The day continues with familiar tasks. The storm outside has not changed the basic needs of human life. People still need food, warmth, conversation, and companionship. Even in a fortress built for kings, daily existence remains a collection of simple moments. You walk deeper into the keep as voices become louder and fires burn brighter. The castle is fully awake now. The blizzard waits beyond the walls, but inside Dover Castle, another morning has begun. You leave the colder public passages behind and enter the quieter rooms where the noble household of Dover Castle begins its winter morning. The atmosphere changes as you move through the doorway. The sounds become softer. The conversations become more careful. And the decorations reveal the presence of people with greater wealth. The room is still cold, even here. Comfort has limits. A fire burns in the hearth, but the warmth reaches only a small area. The stone walls remain cool beneath tapestries and wooden coverings. You can smell smoke from the fire, the faint fragrance of herbs nearby, and the familiar scent of wool garments worn through another winter day. You look around and notice that privilege in 1217 does not mean complete ease. The lordly residents of the castle have better clothing, more personal space, and access to finer foods. However, their lives are still shaped by the same realities as everyone else. They must endure storms, maintain relationships, and manage the complicated responsibilities of medieval society. You imagine a noble household preparing for the day. Servants arrange clothing, attendants carry messages, meals are planned, important discussions take place. Every action follows a careful order because medieval noble life depends heavily on reputation and ceremony. The people living here understand that appearance matters. A lord is not only a person with land and authority, he represents stability. His household reflects his power. The way guests are welcomed, the way meals are presented, and the way servants perform their duties all communicate status. Yet behind these formal traditions are ordinary human moments. Someone struggles to stay warm. Someone quietly worries about supplies. Someone laughs at a small mistake during breakfast. The castle is filled with people, not symbols. You move closer to the main chamber where residents gather. The wooden furniture is sturdy rather than delicate. Tables are arranged for meals and discussions. Candles provide small pools of light against the darker corners of the room. The flames flicker, the shadows move, the storm continues outside. A well-known detail of medieval royal and noble life is that large households required many servants to function. A castle was not maintained by a single family alone. It depended on cooks, cleaners, messengers, guards, craftsmen, and many others whose work supported daily life. You notice how many different roles exist within this household. A person carrying a tray may know the quickest route through the castle. Someone repairing clothing may understand exactly how to protect fabric from winter damage. A messenger may know every path leading toward the surrounding countryside. Knowledge is everywhere. It is simply shared differently than today. Education in noble households often happened through observation and practice. Young people learned expected behavior by watching older family members. They learned manners, responsibilities, and social customs through daily experiences rather than modern classrooms. You see children moving through the rooms, curious about everything around them. The castle is their entire world. The walls that seem intimidating to you are familiar landmarks to them. They know which stairs creak. They know which rooms are warmest. They know where adults keep interesting objects. A curious detail from medieval household life is that small personal items could carry surprising importance. Jewelry, decorated boxes, religious objects, and carefully made clothing accessories were not merely possessions. They could represent family connections, memories, and social identity. A tiny object could hold a large meaning. You watch as servants prepare the noble chamber for another part of the day. The work appears simple, but it requires constant attention. Floors must be cleaned, fires must be maintained, supplies must be organized. Nothing stays comfortable by itself. The storm makes every task more difficult. Snow slows movement outside the castle. Deliveries become uncertain. Travel becomes dangerous. The household must depend more heavily on what has already been stored within the fortress. Researchers continue to question how much medieval noble families experienced isolation during severe winters because surviving documents often describe major events rather than ordinary days. Some accounts focus on political matters, while the small details of domestic life are harder to recover. You can still imagine the quiet moments. A noble person sitting near the fire while listening to the wind, a servant carefully folding a cloak for the next morning, a family sharing stories as snow covers the outside world. The blizzard creates a strange pause in normal activity. Visitors may not arrive, travel plans may change, the castle becomes more focused on itself. You walk toward a narrow opening in the wall and look beyond the chamber. Snow has covered the landscape completely. The cliffs appear almost unreal beneath the white layer. The sea below remains hidden, but you can hear distant waves beneath the wind. The storm has transformed the view. A place known for power and defense now feels almost peaceful. There is something calming about the rhythm of the fortress. The same walls that protect against enemies also create a sheltered world where people eat, work, rest, and share their lives. You return to the chamber and notice the different sounds around you. A servant places wood onto the fire. A cup touches a wooden table. Quiet voices carry across the room. These sounds are small, they are human. The noble household of Dover Castle is often remembered through names of rulers and important events. However, the daily experiences of those who lived there were created by simple routines. They depended on warmth, food, conversation, and cooperation. The people inside this room are waiting for the storm to pass, but they are also living through it. They are making memories. They are continuing traditions. They are finding comfort where they can. As evening approaches, the firelight grows brighter against the dark stone walls. Outside, the snow continues to fall across the fortress towers. Inside, the noble household settles into another quiet winter night. You remain there for a while, listening to the wind and watching the flames. The castle feels less like a monument. It feels like home. You leave the warmer chambers of the noble household and follow the narrow stairways downward, where the sounds of daily labour become clearer. The air changes as you descend. It feels heavier, carrying the smell of damp stone, stored supplies, and the constant smoke drifting from nearby fires. Here, beneath the grand rooms of Dover Castle, you discover the people who keep the fortress alive. The servants. Their work rarely appears in stories about castles. Songs and legends often focus on kings, warriors, and dramatic events. Yet the daily survival of a medieval stronghold depends on hundreds of ordinary actions performed quietly. You step into a busy passage. Someone carries water. Someone folds clothing. Someone prepares tools. Someone clears away yesterday's remains from a meal. The movement never truly stops. The stone floors are cold beneath your feet. Wooden containers scrape gently across the ground as workers move supplies from one place to another. The sound of footsteps echoes through the corridors. creating a steady rhythm that has repeated for generations. You can feel the energy of the working areas. The upper rooms may represent authority, but these lower spaces represent survival. Servants at Dover Castle come from different backgrounds and perform many different roles. Some are highly skilled workers with specialized knowledge. Others complete routine tasks that still require patience and strength. A person carrying firewood understands exactly how much the household needs each day. A person cleaning rooms knows how to protect valuable fabrics. A person preparing food understands how to preserve ingredients when fresh supplies are limited. Every role matters. The winter storm makes their responsibilities heavier. Snow outside means fewer easy journeys. Frozen paths create delays. Supplies must be used carefully. A servant cannot simply walk to a nearby market whenever something runs out. Planning becomes essential. You watch as workers organize their tasks around the weather. The smell of cooking drifts from nearby rooms. It mixes with the scent of smoke, herbs, and old wooden beams. The warmth from the kitchen area slowly spreads into the surrounding spaces, making it one of the most welcoming places in the fortress. The kitchen is not only a place where meals are created, it is a centre of activity. People gather there, news travels there, stories are exchanged there. During difficult weather, it becomes a place where workers can briefly share warmth and conversation. A well-established detail about medieval castles is that kitchens were often separated from main living areas because of the risks associated with fire, smoke, and heat. Large meals required significant preparation, and keeping cooking areas controlled was an important part of castle management. You imagine the workers preparing food during the blizzard. They check stored grain. They examine preserved meat. They measure portions carefully. There is little room for waste. A small mistake could affect many people. The servants understand the rhythm of the castle better than almost anyone. They know when fires need attention. They know which rooms become coldest. They know which doors allow the strongest drafts. Their knowledge comes from experience. You walk through another working chamber and notice clothing being repaired. Winter is especially demanding on fabrics. Wool garments must be maintained because they provide protection from the freezing air. A small surprise from medieval domestic life is that clothing repair was constant activity across all social levels. Even wealthy households did not treat garments as disposable items. Good fabric represented valuable resources, and careful maintenance helped extend its usefulness. You watch a worker carefully stitching damaged material. The hands move slowly. The task requires focus. The storm continues outside. Inside, small repairs continue. You begin to understand that medieval life was built around maintenance. Modern people often think about creating new things, but medieval communities spent much of their time preserving what they already had. Tools were repaired. Clothing was repaired. Buildings were repaired. Relationships were repaired. Life depended on continuation. You hear laughter from a nearby corner. A few workers exchange quiet jokes while completing their duties. Even during a harsh winter, people find ways to create moments of lightness. The idea of medieval servants living without emotion is a mistake. They experienced boredom, humour, friendship, frustration, and pride. They were not simply background figures moving through someone else's story. They had their own lives. They had their own memories. They had their own hopes. The blizzard brings everyone inside the castle closer together. The noble residents may have different rooms and different responsibilities, but everyone depends on the same workers who keep the fortress functioning. The person tending the fire affects the person sleeping above. The person preparing food affects the entire household. The person repairing a door affects everyone protected behind it. The castle is connected through countless small actions. Experts have not reached full agreement on exactly how many people lived and worked inside every medieval royal castle, because numbers change depending on season, political circumstances, and available records. However, large fortresses like Dover required substantial communities to operate effectively. You look around the working spaces and see evidence of that community everywhere. Footsteps, voices, tools, warmth. The storm outside feels distant for a moment. The workers continue. The day continues. As night arrives, the lower areas of the castle become even more important. Fires must be checked. Supplies must be secured. Rooms must be prepared for another freezing evening. You follow the servants through the corridors one last time and notice something simple. The castle survives because people care for it. Not only rulers, not only soldiers, everyone. The walls may be made of stone, but the life inside them comes from human effort. Every meal prepared, every candle lit, and every blanket repaired helps keep Dover Castle awake through the long winter. Outside, the blizzard covers the cliffs. Inside, the servants continue their quiet work, and beneath the great towers, the heart of the fortress keeps beating. You follow the warm glow of firelight deeper into the castle, and arrive where the sounds of preparation become louder. The kitchen is awake before many other parts of Dover Castle. Because hunger does not wait for storms to pass, the room feels alive. You hear chopping against wooden boards. You hear metal tools touching stone surfaces. You hear voices calling gently across the busy space. The flames create a steady crackling sound, filling the air with movement and warmth. The smell reaches you first. Roasting meat, freshly baked bread, smoke from burning wood, herbs hanging near the walls. The kitchen is one of the most important places in the entire fortress, especially during a great blizzard. While the walls protect the castle from outside threats, the kitchen protects everyone from another kind of danger, an empty stomach. You step closer and watch the cooks working carefully. They understand that winter requires planning. Food cannot be wasted. Every ingredient matters. The cooks examine what has been stored before deciding what will be prepared. Grain, dried foods, salted meats, and preserved ingredients become essential when travel becomes difficult. A storm can make ordinary supplies suddenly precious. You notice how organized everything appears. Containers are arranged carefully. Tools are kept close. Workers move around each other with practiced confidence. The kitchen may seem chaotic at first, but there is a hidden order beneath the activity. Everyone knows their role. Someone prepares ingredients, someone manages the fire, someone watches cooking times, someone carries finished dishes toward the dining areas. A castle kitchen is a place where cooperation becomes visible. A widely accepted fact about medieval castles is that food preparation required many workers, especially in large royal or noble households. Feeding residents, guests, and servants was a major operation that required careful management of supplies and labour. You watch a cook checking a large pot over the flames. The steam rises into the colder air, creating a small cloud above the meal. The warmth touches your hands as you stand nearby for a moment. The storm feels far away. The kitchen becomes a shelter within a shelter. You notice the contrast between the simple ingredients and the importance they carry. A bowl of warm food might appear ordinary, but inside a freezing fortress, it represents security. It means Another day has been survived. It means the household can continue. The people preparing these meals understand their responsibility. A poorly managed supply could create problems later. A careless decision could affect many people. The blizzard has changed how everyone thinks. Every piece of firewood has value. Every sack of grain has value. Every meal has value. You look toward the storage areas connected to the kitchen. The shelves and containers hold the results of months of preparation. Before the storm arrived, workers gathered supplies and protected them from moisture and damage. Medieval survival depended on preparation long before danger appeared. A curious detail often overlooked is that medieval cooks used many techniques to make stored food more interesting during long periods when fresh ingredients were unavailable. Herbs, spices, and careful preparation helped transform preserved foods into meals with variety and flavor. The kitchen was not only about survival, it was also about creativity. You imagine the cooks adjusting recipes depending on what was available. They knew how to work with changing circumstances. They understood that winter demanded flexibility. The people here were not helpless against nature. They adapted. You listen as workers exchange quiet conversations while they prepare the evening meal. Some talk about the weather. Some discuss family members. Some share small jokes about daily frustrations. The kitchen becomes a place where human connection grows. During a storm, people spend more time indoors. Shared spaces become more important. The kitchen fire becomes a gathering point where different lives briefly meet. A servant who spends the day carrying supplies may speak with a skilled cook. A worker repairing equipment may exchange stories with someone preparing food. Social boundaries still exist, but daily routines create moments of interaction. You watch a loaf of bread being removed from the heat. The surface is golden. The scent is comforting. The simple sight feels almost magical in the cold castle. Outside, snow continues falling over Dover's cliffs. Inside, people create warmth with their own hands. Researchers still examine how medieval diets varied between regions and social groups, because surviving evidence often gives a clearer picture of wealthy households than ordinary workers. The exact meals of every person inside a fortress remain difficult to reconstruct completely. Still, the kitchen tells its own story. It tells a story of effort. It tells a story of patience. It tells a story of people using what they had. You move closer to the doorway and notice the floor beneath you. It is worn from countless footsteps. Generations of workers have crossed this same space, carrying food, water, and supplies. The kitchen remembers them. The walls remember the heat. The stones remember the noise. As the evening meal approaches, activity increases. Dishes are prepared for different groups within the castle. The noble household receives its portion. Servants and workers receive theirs. Everyone depends on the same carefully managed resources. The storm outside has created uncertainty, but the kitchen provides routine. A meal arrives, a fire burns, people gather. For a short time, the blizzard becomes only a distant sound beyond the walls. You imagine sitting near the edge of the room, listening to the conversations around you. The flames move gently. Shadows stretch across the stone. The smell of food fills the air. This is not the dramatic castle of legends. This is the living castle. It is a place where survival happens through ordinary moments. The cooks continue working. The fires continue burning. The people continue eating. And as another snowy evening settles over Dover Castle, the kitchen remains one of the warmest corners of the fortress, keeping hundreds of lives connected through the simple comfort of food. You climb upward again through the stone passages and return to the outer defences of Dover Castle, where the winter storm feels much stronger. The warmth of the kitchen fades behind you, replaced by sharp air flowing through narrow openings in the walls. The closer you move toward the battlements, the louder the wind becomes. It whistles through gaps in the stone. It pushes against wooden doors. It carries this distant sound of waves crashing below the cliffs. The guards standing along the walls know this weather well. Their work does not pause because snow covers the ground. In fact, difficult conditions make their presence even more important. You step onto the battlement and feel the cold immediately. The stones beneath your hands are frozen. Your cloak moves with the wind. The snow lands quietly around you from this height. Dover Castle appears surrounded by a vast white landscape. The roads are difficult to see. The countryside looks empty. The sea blends with the grey sky, creating a world where direction becomes uncertain for the soldiers watching from above. This view is both beautiful and challenging. Their responsibility is simple. They must remain alert. A castle guard in 1217 is not only watching for enemies. Guards also monitor visitors, messengers, weather changes, and anything unusual around the fortress. A strong defensive position means little if nobody is paying attention. The men along the walls adjust their clothing against the cold. Wool layers provide warmth, while heavy outer garments help block the wind. Their equipment must be maintained carefully because winter conditions can affect materials. You notice the quiet discipline of the watch. One guard looks toward the coastline, another checks a doorway, another speaks briefly with a companion before returning his attention to the horizon. The work can be repetitive. It can also be exhausting. Standing outside for hours during a blizzard requires patience. A detail firmly established by historians is that medieval castles relied heavily on organized garrisons of soldiers and support workers. A fortress was not simply a building with walls. It was a carefully managed military community requiring constant attention. You imagine the thoughts passing through a guard's mind. How long will the storm continue? Will a messenger arrive today? Will the roads become usable again? Will the sea remain dangerous? The soldier may not know the answers, but the duty continues. You walk along the wall and notice how the castle's design helps the defenders. The height provides a wide view. Thick walls create protection. Narrow openings allow observation while limiting exposure. The builders understood that defence depended on both strength and patience. Dover Castle had long been considered one of England's most important fortresses because of its position near the shortest crossing between England and continental Europe. Its role was not only symbolic, it protected a crucial coastal location. The storm, however, reminds you that nature is another powerful force. No wall can command the weather. The wind continues. The snow continues. The guards continue. You hear the sound of boots moving across the battlements. The rhythm is slow and careful because ice creates danger. A single careless step could cause trouble. The soldiers know every part of their route. They learn the castle through experience. They understand which areas receive the strongest winds. They know where snow gathers most quickly. They recognize the sounds of different movements around the fortress. A surprisingly practical habit of medieval watch duty was the reliance on familiarity with surroundings. Guards often learned their post through repeated observation, allowing them to notice changes that outsiders might miss. Knowledge came from repetition. Experience became protection. You look toward a small shelter where guards can briefly escape the worst weather. Even a short break from the wind would feel valuable. A warm drink or a moment near a fire could restore energy before returning to the cold. The life of a soldier was often presented as adventurous, but much of it involved waiting on walls, waiting for messages, waiting for possible danger. Winter made those hours feel longer. Researchers continue to explore whether medieval soldiers stationed in castles regularly faced conditions as severe as later accounts describe. Because written sources often emphasize exceptional moments, everyday guard duty is harder to reconstruct in detail. Still, the scene before you feels clear. A soldier standing beneath a grey sky, a fortress surrounded by snow, a coastline hidden beneath winter clouds. You move toward another section of the wall and notice marks left by years of weather. The stone surface is uneven. Small cracks and worn areas reveal the passage of time. The castle itself requires protection too. Workers must repair damage caused by rain, wind, and freezing temperatures. Soldiers may defend the walls, but craftsmen help preserve them. Everyone contributes. The wind grows stronger as evening approaches. The guards prepare for another shift. Torches and lamps begin appearing around the fortress, creating small points of light against the darkening snow. The atmosphere feels peaceful despite the harsh conditions. The sound of the storm becomes almost like a natural song. The walls stand firm, the sea moves below, the guards remain watchful. You think about the difference between the famous image of a castle and the reality of living inside one. A fortress is often imagined as a place of battles and dramatic events. Yet most days are quieter. Most days involve routine. Most days involve people doing necessary work. Tonight, during this great blizzard, the guards of Dover Castle are not fighting an invading army. They are facing something simpler and more familiar. They are facing winter, and winter demands endurance. As darkness settles over the battlements, you leave the soldiers to their watch and return toward the warmer inner areas of the fortress. Behind you, the wind continues to move across the walls. Ahead, the glow of firelight waits. The castle remains awake beneath the snow. You leave the watchful silence of the battlements and return toward the inner chambers, where the storm feels softer but still impossible to ignore. The great blizzard surrounds Dover Castle, yet within these walls another kind of protection is created through faith, tradition, and familiar rituals. The first thing you notice is the change in sound. The sharp wind becomes distant, footsteps become clearer, voices become calmer. You enter a chapel space where candles glow against the darkness. The small flames move gently whenever cold air slips through openings in the stone. The smell of wax mixes with old wood, damp clothing, and the faint scent of burning herbs. For the people living inside the fortress, this place offers more than shelter from the storm. It offers a moment of stillness. Medieval life was deeply connected with religious belief. Faith shaped daily routines, important celebrations, and personal decisions. Inside a castle, prayers could mark the beginning and end of each day, creating a familiar rhythm when the outside world felt uncertain. You sit quietly for a moment and listen. The storm continues. The prayers continue. Life continues. The people of Dover Castle understand that nature cannot always be controlled. A powerful storm can delay travel, damage buildings, and create fear about the future. In moments like these, many medieval people turned toward spiritual practices for comfort and reassurance. The chapel becomes a gathering place during difficult weather. A servant may enter after completing a long task. A soldier may stop after leaving the cold walls. A noble resident may spend time reflecting on responsibilities. Different people arrive with different concerns, but they share the same quiet space. You notice the details around you. The stone walls are plain compared with the decorated rooms of wealthy households. The candlelight creates shadows that move across carved surfaces. The air feels cool, but the atmosphere feels peaceful. A widely recognized detail from medieval history is that monasteries, churches, and chapels played major roles in preserving knowledge, recording events, and shaping community life. Religious spaces were not only places of worship, they were also important centers of learning and organization. Inside a castle, religion connected private feelings with public duties. People prayed for safety. They prayed for health. They prayed for those traveling through dangerous weather. You imagine someone inside the chapel during the height of the blizzard, listening to the wind outside and wondering when the snow would finally stop. Fear would have been familiar, so would hope. The medieval world contained many uncertainties. Illness could arrive suddenly, travel could become dangerous, harvests could fail, a single difficult season could affect many lives. Faith gave people a way to understand experiences that seemed beyond human control. You walk farther into the quiet room and notice small objects used during religious practices. Candles, books, and carefully preserved items remind you that even a fortress focused on defense contained spaces dedicated to reflection. A fascinating little detail from the medieval world is that written prayers and religious texts were often treated as valuable possessions because producing books required significant time and skill. Before widespread printing, each manuscript involved careful work by trained writers and artists. A book was not simply an object, it was a creation, it was a responsibility. You think about the contrast between the outside storm and the careful patience required to produce such works. The blizzard moves quickly and violently. A manuscript develops slowly through quiet attention. Both require endurance. The people inside Dover Castle would have understood patience. Their lives depended on waiting for many things. They waited for messages. They waited for weather changes. They waited for supplies. The storm creates a strange feeling of separation. The castle becomes its own small world. Researchers continue to investigate how much medieval people viewed severe weather as a spiritual sign because interpretations differed between individuals and communities. Some may have seen storms as natural events, while others connected them with deeper meaning shaped by religious beliefs and local traditions. You look around the chapel and imagine the different thoughts held by the people gathered there. A soldier may think about family far away. A servant may worry about tomorrow's work. A child may simply find comfort in the candlelight. Everyone experiences the same storm differently. That is what makes the castle feel alive. Beyond the chapel walls, the fortress continues its normal routines. Fires need tending. Meals need preparing. Animals need care. Yet moments of prayer create pauses within the constant activity. They create breathing spaces. You leave the chapel and move through the corridors again. The air becomes colder as you approach the outer sections of the building. The smell of smoke returns. The sound of the wind grows stronger. The storm has not changed, but perhaps the people inside have changed slightly. They have found another way to endure it. You pass workers carrying supplies and guards returning from their duties. Some pause briefly near warm fires. Others exchange quiet words before continuing their tasks. The castle is full of small rituals, lighting candles, sharing meals, offering prayers, checking doors, maintaining fires. These actions may seem ordinary, but they create stability during uncertain times. You realize that survival inside Dover Castle does not depend only on stone walls or military strength. It depends on habits repeated every day. It depends on communities supporting one another. The blizzard outside remains powerful, covering the cliffs and darkening the sky, yet inside the fortress, people continue creating moments of warmth. The candles burn, the prayers rise, the fires glow. The castle rests beneath the storm, while its inhabitants hold on to familiar traditions. And as the night grows deeper, you begin to understand that medieval life was not only about hardship, it was also about connection. It was about finding comfort in shared spaces. It was about creating peace within a world that could change without warning. You follow the quieter corridors of Dover Castle and discover a different kind of world hidden among the towering walls. Here, the sounds are lighter, the footsteps are quicker, the voices carry a sense of curiosity rather than responsibility. This is the world of children growing up inside the fortress. The great blizzard still covers the landscape outside, but for the younger residents of the castle, winter is not only a season of difficulty, it is also a season filled with discovery, imagination, and small adventures. You walk through a chamber where children gather near the warmth of a fire. Their clothing is practical and layered for the cold. Wool surrounds them like a protective shield, though it cannot completely remove the chill from the stone room. The smell of smoke drifts through the air. The fire crackles softly. The storm whispers beyond the walls. Inside, the children create their own world. A medieval castle might seem like a serious place filled only with soldiers and officials. But young people lived there too. They learned, played, explored, and slowly discovered their place within the household. You watch as a child traces patterns into the dust near the floor. Another listens closely while an older person explains a story. Someone else looks toward the narrow window, fascinated by the snow covering the outside world. To them, Dover Castle is not only a fortress, it is home. The rooms that appear mysterious to you are familiar places to them. They know which stairways lead to hidden corners. They know which areas feel warmest. They know which adults are likely to share interesting stories. Their relationship with the castle is completely different from that of visitors or soldiers. The walls are not just defences, they are memories. You notice how children learn through observation. Medieval childhood did not follow the same structure as modern childhood. Many young people learned skills by watching adults and participating in daily activities. A well-established fact about medieval society is that children's experiences varied greatly depending on their family's social position. Children from noble households often received training connected to future responsibilities, while children from working families usually learned practical skills needed for everyday life. Inside Dover Castle, these differences would be visible. A noble child might learn manners, religious lessons, and the expectations of courtly behaviour. Another child might learn household tasks, animal care, or crafts by assisting adults. Yet both would experience the same winter storm. Both would hear the wind. Both would see snow covering the castle walls. You move toward a quieter corner where a few children are listening to a story. Storytelling would have been an important part of medieval life, especially during long evenings when outdoor activities became difficult. The storm creates time. Time for conversations, time for memories, time for imagination. A fascinating little detail from medieval childhood is that games did exist, although evidence about them is often incomplete. Archaeologists have discovered objects suggesting children played with simple toys, including carved figures and small replicas of everyday items. Children did not need elaborate entertainment. They used what they had. A small wooden object could become a treasured possession. A hallway could become an adventure route. A snowy courtyard could become a place of wonder. You imagine the children looking at the storm outside and seeing something different from the adults. While older residents worry about supplies and travel, children may simply notice the beauty of the snow. They may wonder how deep the snow has become. They may listen to the strange sounds created by the wind. They may imagine stories about the castle itself. The fortress becomes part of their imagination. Researchers continue to explore how medieval children experienced emotional life because written sources often focus more on adults. Politics and religious matters, the thoughts, games, and private feelings of ordinary children are much harder to recover from historical records. Still, small clues remain: a toy, a piece of clothing, a drawing, a simple object left behind. Each item provides a tiny glimpse into childhood centuries ago. You walk through another room and imagine lessons taking place. Learning in a medieval noble household could involve religious instruction, reading, languages, history, and social behavior. Education was closely connected with future roles and expectations. A young person was not simply preparing for a job, they were preparing for a place in society. The castle itself became a teacher. The walls showed strength, the household showed hierarchy, the routine showed responsibility. Every day offered lessons. You hear laughter from the children near the fire. Their happiness feels surprising considering the harsh weather outside. Yet perhaps this is one of the most human parts of the castle. People still find joy during difficult moments. They still tell stories. They still play. They still laugh. The blizzard cannot remove every pleasant moment. You look around the chamber again and notice the contrast. Heavy stone surrounds the children, but their voices make the space feel warmer. The fortress may have been built for defense, but within these walls, generations experienced ordinary family life. Birthdays may have been remembered, stories may have been repeated, friendships may have formed, small moments may have become lifelong memories. You think about how different the castle would feel without these younger voices. A fortress without children would feel incomplete. Their presence reminds you that Dover Castle was not only a military structure, it was a community. It held people at every stage of life. As evening arrives, the children slowly leave the chamber. The fires are checked. The corridors become quieter. The storm continues outside, but the day has passed peacefully. You remain for a moment beside the warm fire and listen to the fading sounds of the castle. The children are gone now. The soldiers continue their watch. The servants continue their work. The snow continues falling. Yet within the massive walls of Dover Castle, childhood continues even during the greatest winter storm. You leave the warmth of the children's rooms and follow the quieter routes leading toward the parts of Dover Castle connected with supplies, trade, and outside connections. The storm still rules the landscape beyond the walls, and every person inside the fortress understands the importance of resources. A castle can have strong defences, it can have tall towers, it can have thick walls. But without supplies, even the strongest fortress becomes vulnerable. You walk through storage areas where careful planning from previous months now becomes valuable. The air smells of grain, dried foods, wood, and cool stone. Wooden containers line the spaces, protected from moisture as much as possible. The people who manage these supplies are watching the blizzard closely. Snow changes everything. Roads become difficult. Travel becomes slower. Messages become uncertain. A merchant who might normally arrive with goods may be forced to wait until conditions improve. A cart carrying supplies may remain somewhere beyond the castle walls until the weather becomes safer. Inside Dover Castle, patience becomes part of survival. You imagine the workers checking stored resources carefully. They are not only counting food, they are calculating time. How long will the storm last? How much grain remains? How much firewood is available? How many people need to be supported? These questions would influence daily decisions throughout the fortress. The surviving records from the medieval period show that castles relied on extensive networks of supply and support. A royal fortress was connected to surrounding communities through agriculture, trade, administration, and transportation. It was never completely separate from the world outside its walls. You moved toward a passage where merchants and visitors would normally enter the castle environment. During calmer seasons, this area would bring movement and exchange. People would arrive with goods, information, and stories from distant places. Now, the entrance feels different. The snow has reduced activity. The usual sounds of travel are missing. There are no busy conversations from arriving traders. There are no animals carrying fresh deliveries. Only the wind remains. You place your hand near the cold doorway and imagine how important these entrances were. A castle was not only a defensive structure, it was also a place where goods and information flowed. The people inside needed connections. Even powerful households depended on others. A lesser-known part of medieval life was the importance of seasonal timing. Communities often planned activities around weather patterns, harvest periods, and travel conditions. A delay caused by winter could affect many decisions long after the snow disappeared. The blizzard is temporary, its effects can last longer. You think about the merchants who travelled across medieval England. Their journeys were difficult even under normal conditions. Roads could be rough, distances could be long, and weather could quickly create obstacles. Yet trade continued because people needed each other. A farmer growing grain, a craftsperson creating tools, a merchant transporting goods, a castle worker organizing supplies. Each person formed part of a larger system. You enter another storage chamber where workers inspect items carefully. Some supplies are protected for immediate use. Others are saved for later. Every decision requires balance. Waste is dangerous. Carelessness is dangerous. Preparation is protection. The smell of stored grain fills the room. It is earthy and familiar. The sound of footsteps creates gentle echoes against the stone walls. The workers speak quietly because the atmosphere feels serious. The storm has made everyone more aware of uncertainty. Historians have reached different conclusions about how frequently medieval castles experienced serious shortages during winter, because conditions varied widely between regions and years. Some fortresses had strong supply systems, while others could face difficult circumstances when weather or politics disrupted normal routines. For the residents of Dover Castle, preparation offers reassurance. They know the fortress contains resources. They know people are working, they know the walls provide protection. You walk toward a small area where workers discuss deliveries that may arrive once the weather improves. Their conversations reveal something important about medieval life. People were always connected, even during isolation. They were thinking about the outside world. They were thinking about future journeys. They were thinking about returning to normal routines. A small but fascinating discovery from medieval domestic life is that trade networks sometimes carried far more than basic necessities. Along with food and materials, merchants could transport news, cultural ideas, and objects from distant regions. A single visitor could bring stories from places most castle residents would never see. A small object could reveal a much larger world. You imagine a merchant arriving after the storm, bringing information about nearby villages and distant towns. The people inside Dover Castle would want to know what happened beyond their walls. Did other communities survive the storm? Were roads damaged? Were supplies available elsewhere? News was valuable. Information was a resource. The blizzard creates a temporary silence, but curiosity remains. You continue through the fortress and notice how many people contribute to maintaining connections. Someone records information. Someone organizes storage. Someone prepares animals for future travel. Someone repairs equipment that will later support journeys. The castle is waiting for clearer skies, waiting for safer paths, waiting for movement to return. Outside, the snow continues covering the land around Dover. The cliffs remain hidden beneath the winter storm. The sea continues its endless motion below. Inside, people adapt. They always have. You begin to understand that medieval life was not simply a struggle against nature. It was a constant relationship with nature. People watched the seasons, adjusted their plans, and learned how to continue despite uncertainty. The merchants, farmers, workers, and travellers connected to Dover Castle all played a part in this story. Their lives reached far beyond the walls. Their efforts help keep the fortress alive. As the day fades, you leave the storage areas and return toward the warmer inner passages. The sound of the storm follows you. But now you understand another part of castle life. A fortress survives through stone, but it also survives through connections. You move away from the storage chambers and follow a passage that leads toward the areas where animals are kept. The sounds change before you see anything. The quiet rhythm of human footsteps is joined by softer noises from the creatures that share life inside Dover Castle. A horse shifts its weight. A bird calls softly. Wood creaks beneath careful movement. The smell of hay reaches you first, mixed with leather, damp straw, and the earthy scent of animals sheltered from the winter storm. The great blizzard has changed the outside world, but inside the castle, these animals remain essential. They are not simply companions. They are part of the fortress economy, transportation system, and daily routine. You step into the stable area and feel the difference immediately. The air is warmer here, though still touched by winter. The animals create their own gentle heat, and workers move around them with practiced care. The horses are especially important. A medieval castle without horses would struggle to function. They carry riders, transport supplies, and support communication between distant places. During peaceful times, they help people travel. During difficult times, they become even more valuable. You watch a stable worker carefully check in a horse's condition. The animal's coat is brushed, its food is prepared, its shelter is inspected. Small tasks, important tasks. The people caring for these animals understand that neglect could create serious problems. A sick horse could delay a message. A damaged saddle could interrupt travel. A weak animal could affect the entire household. You notice how calm the workers appear. They know the animals well. They understand small signs of discomfort. They recognize changes in behavior. The relationship between humans and animals inside the castle is built on familiarity. You walk past wooden stalls where horses rest after previous journeys. The storm has limited movement, but the animals still require attention every day. They cannot simply be ignored until the snow disappears. The castle must continue caring for every living thing within its walls. Historical evidence confirms that medieval households depended heavily on horses for transportation, warfare, agriculture, and communication. Wealthy and powerful institutions often maintained groups of animals because movement and labour were central to their success. Yet horses were not the only creatures living around a medieval fortress. You hear smaller sounds nearby: birds, dogs, perhaps other animals connected with daily activities. Dogs held a special place in medieval households. They could assist with hunting, protection, and companionship. Different types of dogs served different purposes, and their presence reflected the practical needs of the people who cared for them. You imagine a castle dog moving through the corridors, familiar with every corner of the fortress. It may recognize servants by their footsteps and wait near doors where interesting activity takes place. An overlooked habit of castle residents was the close attention they paid to animals' routines. Without modern veterinary science, people relied on observation and experience. They learned from generations of practical knowledge. They watched behavior. They noticed injuries. They adjusted care when necessary. The bond was practical, but it was also personal. You continue through the animal areas and notice how much work is required. Hay must be carried. Spaces must be cleaned. Food must be prepared. Equipment must be maintained. The storm increases the challenge. Supplies may be harder to replace. Outdoor areas become dangerous. Workers must spend more time ensuring that animals remain protected from the cold. The horses may not understand the reason for the unusual weather, but they respond to the same environment as everyone else. They feel the colder air, they hear the stronger winds. They remain inside while snow covers the land beyond the castle. The fortress becomes a shared shelter. People and animals depend on one another. The full picture remains uncertain because medieval records often describe valuable animals more clearly than ordinary ones. Experts know much about elite households and important horses, but the daily lives of many lesser animals are harder to reconstruct. Still, clues remain. Bones found at historical sites, images in manuscripts, written descriptions, together. These pieces help reveal a world where animals were deeply connected to human survival. You stand beside a stable doorway and listen to the storm outside. The wind sounds powerful, but the stable feels peaceful. The animals move slowly. Workers speak quietly. The atmosphere is calmer than the exposed battlements above. The stable becomes another hidden heart of the castle. It is not as grand as the Great Hall. It is not as impressive as the towers, but it is necessary. Without these animals, many parts of medieval life would become much more difficult. You think about the horses that carried messages across dangerous roads. You think about the animals that supported hunting and travel. You think about the workers who cared for them during cold nights when everyone wanted to remain near a fire. Their efforts rarely appear in famous stories, yet they mattered. A fascinating detail from medieval animal care is that horses were often valuable enough to receive careful attention similar to other important possessions. A well-trained horse represented significant investment, and losing one could create serious difficulties. The storm continues outside. Inside the stable, life continues too. You watch as a worker places fresh bedding into a stall. The simple action creates comfort. Another worker checks water supplies. Someone else quietly closes a wooden barrier to protect the animals from drafts. The actions are repetitive. The actions are necessary. The actions keep the castle functioning. You leave the stable area slowly, carrying with you the sounds of the animals and the warmth of the space. The corridors ahead feel colder again. But the memory of the stable remains. Dover Castle is not only made of stone rooms and defensive walls, it is also made of living things, people, animals, relationships. Every creature inside the fortress has a role. Every life contributes to the story as the snow continues falling across the cliffs. The animals settle into another winter evening. The horses rest. The workers finish their tasks. The castle grows quieter. Yet beneath the silence, life remains. You return toward the inner chambers as the evening deepens, leaving the quiet warmth of the stables behind. The great blizzard has now settled over Dover Castle like a heavy blanket, covering the outside world in darkness and snow. The fortress feels different at night. The corridors are calmer. The voices are softer. The fires seem brighter. You hear the wind moving around the towers, creating a deep sound that travels through the stone walls. It is not a sudden noise, but a constant presence, reminding everyone that the storm is still there. Tonight, the castle belongs to the darkness. You walk slowly through the passages, following the glow of candles placed along the walls. Their flames tremble whenever cold air enters through small openings. The smell of burning wax mixes with smoke from nearby fireplaces, and the damp scent of winter clothing. The people inside Dover Castle prepare for the longest hours of the storm. Night changes everything. During the day, movement fills the fortress. Workers complete tasks. Messages are delivered. People gather in shared spaces after sunset. The castle becomes quieter, but it never becomes completely still. Someone must watch the fires. Someone must guard the walls. Someone must care for the animals. Someone must remain ready. You enter a large hall where several residents have gathered near the warmth. The fire creates a golden glow across the room, making the stone walls appear softer. Outside, snow strikes against the windows with gentle taps. The storm has trapped everyone together. Yet this isolation creates its own kind of community. People share stories, they exchange news, they sit closer than usual. The cold encourages connection. You imagine a servant resting after a long day of work. You imagine a guard returning from the walls and warming frozen hands near the fire. You imagine a family listening to old tales while the storm surrounds their home. A castle at night is not silent. It breathes, it creaks, it remembers. The documented history of medieval fortresses shows that night watches were an essential part of castle security. Guards needed to remain alert after dark because threats did not disappear with the setting sun. A strong defense required constant attention, but not every sound in the night was dangerous. A wooden beam shifting could sound like movement. A gust of wind could resemble distant voices. An animal moving nearby could create sudden concern. You can imagine how easily a storm could make ordinary noises feel mysterious. You walk toward a narrow window and look outside. The darkness hides the landscape. The cliffs that seemed so powerful during the day have disappeared into the night. Only the sound of the sea remains below. The waves continue their endless movement. The wind continues its journey. The snow continues falling. You place your hand against the cold stone and think about the people who stood in this same place centuries ago. They also looked into storms. They also wondered when the weather would change. The experience connects you across time. The exact emotions of medieval people during extreme storms remain difficult to understand because personal writings from ordinary castle residents are rare. Historians can study buildings, records, and objects, but private thoughts often remain hidden. Still, the setting reveals something important. People were adaptable. They found ways to continue. You move through another corridor where workers make final preparations before resting. A door is checked. A fire is adjusted. Supplies are placed where they can be reached quickly. These small actions create security. An unusual practice from the medieval world involved using specific routines to manage uncertainty. People often followed repeated patterns in daily life because predictable actions provided stability in a world where weather, illness, and travel could change suddenly. Routine was a form of comfort. You think about how different this night would feel compared with a modern evening. There are no electric lights filling every corner. There are no quick messages arriving from distant places. There are no easy ways to escape the storm. Instead, people rely on the things around them: fire, food, shelter, companionship. The castle provides these things, but only because many people have worked to maintain them. You return to the Great Hall and notice the quieter atmosphere. Some residents have gone to sleep. Others remain awake for a little longer. The fire has become lower, but someone will add more wood before it fades. The smell of warm ashes fills the room. The sound of conversation becomes softer. The storm becomes almost soothing. You sit near the edge of the hall and listen. The wind outside creates a steady rhythm. The flames move slowly. The old stones surround you. For a moment, the fortress does not feel like a military structure. It feels like a shelter. It feels like a place where people wait together. A small but fascinating discovery from medieval household life is that sleeping arrangements were often more communal than modern expectations. Many people shared spaces, especially among servants and workers, because privacy was limited and warmth was valuable. The idea of everyone having separate quiet rooms would have felt unfamiliar. Warmth mattered more. Company mattered more. You imagine the castle settling into sleep. Footsteps become rare. Voices disappear. Candles burn lower. The storm continues its endless song around the walls. Yet Dover Castle remains awake. The guards continue watching. The fires continue burning. The people continue resting beneath the protection of stone. The night is long. The blizzard is powerful. But the fortress has endured many difficult evenings before. You walk once more through the shadowed corridors, noticing the small signs of life everywhere: a folded blanket, a glowing fireplace, a wooden cup left beside a table, a tool waiting for tomorrow's work. These simple objects tell the story of survival, not through battles, not through famous speeches, through ordinary moments. As the deepest part of the night arrives, the castle becomes peaceful. The wind still surrounds the walls, but inside there is a sense of calm. The storm may control the landscape outside, it may cover roads and fields, it may hide the sea, but within Dover Castle, life continues quietly beneath the snow, and as you listen to the ancient fortress resting through the winter night, You begin to understand the strength of the people who called these cold stone walls home. You wake with the pale light of morning slowly entering Dover Castle, though the blizzard has not completely released its grip. The storm has weakened slightly, but the air remains cold and heavy. Snow still covers the ground outside, and the fortress begins another day of careful attention. You step into the corridor and feel the familiar chill beneath your feet. The castle is quieter than yesterday, not empty, just slower. After a long night of wind and darkness, people move with a little more caution. The great storm has tested everyone inside these walls. Now, attention turns toward health, comfort, and the small problems that winter creates. You follow the sound of voices toward the rooms where people receive care. In medieval castles, illness and injury were common parts of life. Crowded living conditions, difficult work, and changing weather could all affect people's well-being. The smell of herbs reaches you before you enter. Dried plants hang from wooden beams. Warm liquids are prepared near the fire. Cloth and water are carefully arranged. The atmosphere is calm. There is no dramatic rush. Most medieval care depended on patience and observation. A person's condition was watched closely. Rest, warmth, food, and traditional remedies were often considered important parts of recovery. You see someone preparing a simple mixture near the hearth. The fire creates a gentle warmth across the room, while the scent of plants fills the air. Some ingredients are familiar. Others come from distant places through trade networks that connected medieval communities. The surviving evidence from this era shows that medieval healers used a combination of practical experience, traditional knowledge, and ideas inherited from earlier cultures. Their understanding of the body was very different from modern medicine, but it was not without careful observation. People paid attention, they experimented, they learned from experience. You move closer and notice the quiet work taking place. Someone cleans a small injury, someone prepares a drink, someone helps an older resident remain comfortable near the fire. Care often happened through community. Family members helped, servants assisted. Religious communities sometimes provided support. The idea of health was connected with the entire household. The blizzard makes this even clearer. When travel becomes difficult, people cannot easily seek help elsewhere. The knowledge already inside the castle becomes especially valuable. You look around the room and think about how different medicine felt in 1217. There were no modern hospitals, no advanced machines, and no quick solutions. Instead, people relied on the skills available to them. A small forgotten detail from castle life was the importance of household knowledge. Many people understood basic ways to treat common problems because professional healers were not always nearby. Simple actions mattered. Keeping someone warm mattered. Providing clean water mattered. Allowing rest mattered. You notice how much attention is given to comfort. A blanket is adjusted. A cup is offered. A fire is maintained. These actions may appear small, but they reveal something important. Care is not only about cures, care is also about kindness. You leave the room briefly and walk through the castle halls. The smell of smoke follows you from the fireplaces. The stone walls remain cold, but the fortress feels more peaceful than during the height of the storm. The blizzard has changed everyone's routine. Some workers have tired expressions. Some guards move more slowly. Some residents speak quietly about the weather, yet the castle continues functioning. Medieval people were accustomed to uncertainty. Life could change because of weather, illness, harvest problems, or political events. Adaptation was not a special skill. It was part of everyday existence. The full picture remains uncertain because many medieval medical practices were recorded by educated writers rather than ordinary people. Surviving sources often describe theories and treatments, but they reveal less about the daily experiences of common residents receiving care. You return to the warmer areas of the castle and notice how health connects with every part of life. Food affects strength. Warmth affects comfort. Clean spaces affect well-being. Social support affects recovery. The fortress community depends on all these things working together. You think about the workers who prepared meals during the storm, the people who maintained fires, the servants who carried supplies. Their efforts also helped protect health. A person recovering from illness needed more than a remedy. They needed a functioning household. You pass a small room where someone rests near a fire. The flames create soft light against the walls. Outside, snow reflects the morning sky. The scene feels peaceful. The person resting is not facing the storm alone. Someone has brought food. Someone has offered help. Someone has stayed nearby. That may be one of the most important lessons hidden within medieval life. Survival was rarely achieved by one person. Communities endured difficult conditions because people depended on each other. A curious example of adaptation was the way medieval households used available resources creatively. Plants, foods, fabrics, and everyday objects often served multiple purposes because communities could not waste valuable materials. Everything had a place. Everything had a purpose. You walk toward a window and observe the changing weather. The snowfall is lighter now. The wind has lost some of its strength. The world outside slowly begins to reveal itself again. The cliffs return. The landscape returns. The path begins to appear beneath the snow. The castle residents notice these changes too. Hope returns quietly, not with celebration, not with dramatic announcements. Simply through small signs, a clearer sky, a calmer wind, a safer road. The people inside Dover Castle know that winter is not finished. More cold days will come, more challenges may appear, but for this moment, the fortress feels steady. You return through the corridors and hear familiar sounds again. Footsteps, voices, fire, work. The same sounds that have carried through the castle since the beginning of the storm. The great blizzard has revealed something about life inside these walls. The castle's strength does not come only from its stone foundations. It comes from people caring for one another. It comes from knowledge passed between generations. It comes from patience during difficult moments. As the morning grows brighter, Dover Castle settles back into its rhythm. The fires burn, the workers move, the residents recover, and beneath the winter sky, the fortress continues its quiet story. You move through the recovering halls of Dover Castle and begin to notice something different. The storm has not vanished completely. But the fortress is no longer focused only on survival. People are returning to their familiar routines. And beneath those routines, a quieter social world begins to appear. The castle is not only a place of duties, it is a place of relationships. You hear conversations passing between rooms, a servant shares news with another worker, a guard tells a small story from the night watch. A child laughs somewhere near the fire. These moments are easy to overlook, yet they reveal the human side of medieval life. The great walls of Dover Castle protected people from outside dangers, but they also created a community inside. You walk through the great hall where people gather for meals, discussions, and moments of rest. The room feels different now that the worst of the storm has passed. The smell of cooked food mixes with smoke from the hearth. Candlelight reflects against wooden surfaces. The sound of voices creates a gentle warmth that the fire alone cannot provide. This is where people become more than their roles. A soldier is not only a soldier, a servant is not only a servant. A noble person is not only a title. Everyone carries personal experiences, friendships, worries, and memories. Medieval society was highly structured, with clear differences between social groups, yet daily life required constant interaction between people from different positions. The castle could not function if every person remained completely separate. You notice a servant speaking with a craftsman near the edge of the hall. They discuss repairs needed after the storm. Nearby, a group of workers share a meal and exchange stories about the unusual weather. The conversations are simple. The moments are ordinary, but ordinary moments create history. The surviving evidence from medieval households shows that castles were complex communities where many professions worked together. People with different responsibilities depended on each other. From food preparation and maintenance to security and administration. You imagine how friendships might form inside these walls. A worker who spends years maintaining rooms may become familiar with the habits of noble residents. A guard may develop strong bonds with companions after many nights of watching the walls together. A child raised within the fortress may remember certain servants as important figures throughout life. The castle creates connections through repetition. People see the same faces. They share the same spaces. They experience the same seasons. The blizzard has strengthened those connections because difficult conditions often bring people closer. When roads disappear beneath snow and outdoor movement becomes limited, the community inside the fortress becomes even more important. You walk toward a smaller chamber where people gather during quieter hours. Here, social life feels less formal. There are no grand ceremonies. There are no important visitors demanding attention. There are simply people spending time together. A fascinating glimpse into ordinary medieval life comes from the importance of storytelling. Before modern entertainment, stories, songs, and spoken memories were central ways for people to share knowledge and create companionship. Long evenings inside castles offered many opportunities for conversation. You imagine someone telling a tale beside the fire. Perhaps it is a story of a distant journey. Perhaps it is a family memory. Perhaps it's a humorous mistake that everyone enjoys hearing again. The details may change over time, but the purpose remains the same. Connection. You continue through the hall and notice small signs of disagreement as well. A castle community is not always peaceful. People have different personalities. They have different priorities. They sometimes become frustrated with one another. A crowded fortress during a long winter storm would not create perfect harmony. Someone may complain about work. Someone may disagree about responsibilities. Someone may become impatient. That is part of being human. The evidence does not provide a complete answer about how medieval castle residents handled every personal conflict, because private conversations were rarely recorded. Written sources often preserve political events and official matters, while everyday disagreements remain mostly invisible. Still, the spaces themselves offer clues. A shared hall suggests interaction. A busy kitchen suggests cooperation. A crowded household suggests negotiation. People had to learn how to live together. You notice another interesting feature of castle society. Status mattered, but relationships also mattered. A person's reputation depended not only on their position, but also on how they treated others and fulfilled their responsibilities. Respect could be earned through reliability. Trust could be built through years of service. A person's value was often connected to what they contributed. You think about the workers who kept Dover Castle functioning during the blizzard, the cooks who prepared meals, the guards who watched the walls, the servants who carried supplies, the people who cared for animals and repaired equipment. Their work created the conditions that allowed everyone else to live. The castle was a network of effort. You step near a window and watch snow melting slowly from the rooftops. Small drops of water fall from the edges, creating a gentle tapping sound below. The smell of wet stone fills the air as the weather begins its slow transition. The fortress is changing. The people are changing with it. The storm has left memories behind. Someone will remember the night when the wind shook the walls. Someone will remember gathering near the fire. Someone will remember the unusual quiet that covered the landscape. A small but fascinating detail about medieval memory is that many people preserved their experiences through oral tradition rather than written records. Stories passed between generations helped communities remember important events, even when no official document recorded them. The castle itself becomes part of those memories. The rooms hold conversations, the walls hold routines, the paths hold footsteps. You continue walking through Dover Castle and begin to see it differently. At first, it appeared to be a massive structure built from stone and power. Now, it feels like a collection of countless human experiences. Every room has a story. Every person has a story. Every winter has a story. As evening returns, the fortress becomes peaceful again. The fires glow, the voices soften. People settle into familiar patterns after the unusual days of the blizzard. The castle is not completely changed. It is simply reminded of what it has always been. A home, a workplace, a community, and within its ancient walls. Ordinary people continue creating extraordinary history through the quiet details of everyday life. You step toward the outer courtyards of Dover Castle as the blizzard finally begins to weaken. The world outside the walls is still covered in snow, but the storm no longer feels endless. The wind has softened, and the fortress seems to take its first careful breath after days of struggle. The morning air feels different. It feels lighter. The cold remains, but the sharpness has faded. You walk across the stone pathways and notice the signs left behind by the storm. Snow rests along the edges of buildings. Footprints cross the courtyard in different directions. Wooden surfaces show marks from the weather. The castle is not damaged beyond repair, but everyone can see that winter has demanded attention. The people of Dover Castle begin their recovery, not with celebration, with work. A fortress does not return to normal by itself. The same people who protected it during the storm must now restore the spaces around them. Workers clear paths. Servants inspect rooms. Guards examine sections of the walls. The castle wakes slowly. You hear shovels moving through snow. You hear doors opening after days of heavy wind. You hear voices discussing what needs to be done. The smell of fresh wood fills the air as workers check materials that may need repair. Nearby fires create warmth against the cold morning. The scent of smoke drifts upward, mixing with the clean smell of snow. The storm has passed its strongest moment, but its effects remain. The surviving evidence from medieval castles shows that maintenance was a constant part of fortress life. Walls, roofs, equipment, and living spaces all required regular care. A castle was not simply built and forgotten. It needed continuous attention from skilled workers. You follow a group of workers examining parts of the fortress. Some look at wooden structures affected by moisture. Others check areas where snow has collected heavily. Their movements are careful because rushing could create more problems. Patience guides them. Experience guides them. They understand that repairs require planning. A damaged door may need new materials. A weakened section may need inspection. A blocked path may need clearing. Every task connects with another. You think about how different this recovery feels from the dramatic battles often associated with castles. There are no armies approaching. There are no great moments of conflict. There is simply restoration. The quiet work of making life comfortable again. You move toward the courtyard where animals are being brought outside after spending more time sheltered indoors. Horses step carefully across the snow. Workers guide them slowly, allowing them to adjust to the changed environment. The castle begins moving again. Travel becomes possible. Supplies can be checked. Messages can eventually leave. The fortress reconnects with the surrounding landscape. A small but fascinating detail from medieval recovery practices is that communities often reused and repaired materials whenever possible. Wood, metal, cloth, and tools were valuable resources, so extending their usefulness was an important habit. Nothing was easily replaced. Everything carried value. You watch a worker repairing a damaged piece of equipment. The task requires skill and concentration. The same hands that maintain everyday objects help preserve the entire household. This reveals something important about medieval life. Craftsmanship was essential. The people who built and repaired things were not simply performing minor tasks. They carried knowledge that allowed communities to survive. You walk along the castle walls and see guards returning to their usual routines. The atmosphere has changed. During the height of the blizzard, every watch felt tense. Now, the soldiers can observe the landscape with more confidence. The sea is visible again. The cliffs are visible again. The roads slowly emerge beneath the snow. The world returns. Researchers continue examining how quickly medieval communities recovered from severe winter conditions because experiences differed greatly depending on resources, location, and preparation. A wealthy royal fortress could respond differently from a smaller settlement with fewer supplies. Dover Castle had advantages. Its strong walls provided protection. Its storage systems provided support. Its large community provided labour. Still, recovery required effort from everyone. You notice workers sharing information as they move through the courtyard. One person points out a problem. Another suggests a solution. Someone else offers assistance. The recovery is a shared process. The castle does not belong only to those with authority. It belongs to everyone who keeps it functioning. You pause near the entrance and look back toward the inner halls. The same rooms that felt isolated during the storm now appear connected again. People move between spaces more freely. Conversations become louder. Daily routines return. The fortress has survived, but survival has left a memory. You imagine residents telling stories about the great blizzard in the years afterward. They may remember the strength of the wind. They may remember the unusual amount of snow. They may remember the nights spent close to the fire. The details may change as stories pass between people. A charming glimpse into medieval memory comes from the way communities preserved important experiences through spoken stories. Events were often remembered through family conversations and local traditions, allowing people to keep connections with the past. The castle itself becomes part of those stories. The walls witness the storm. The halls witness the waiting. The kitchens witness the preparation. The chambers witness the quiet moments of fear and comfort. You walk through a corridor where the sunlight now reaches more clearly. Dust moves through the air, the stone surfaces appear warmer than before. The fortress feels renewed. Not because the storm never happened, because the storm happened. And people responded. The lesson is not only about endurance, it is about adaptation. Medieval people lived in a world where many things remained uncertain. Weather could change plans, travel could become impossible, supplies could become limited. Yet communities developed ways to continue. They repaired, they adjusted, they rebuilt. You step outside once more and feel the cold air around you. The snow beneath your feet reflects the pale winter light. The great towers of Dover Castle rise above the landscape. Still watching over the coast, the blizzard has weakened. The fortress has recovered. The people have returned to their routines. But the memory of those difficult days remains within the stone walls, and as you continue exploring the castle, you begin to understand that history is not only found in moments of victory or crisis. Sometimes history lives in the quiet work that follows. You walk through the quieter areas of Dover Castle and begin to notice the traces left behind by countless lives. The storm has passed, the snow is slowly retreating, and the fortress has returned to its familiar rhythm. Yet something feels different. The blizzard has revealed the hidden strength of the people who lived here. You run your fingers along the cold stone walls and think about all the hands that touch these surfaces before you. Builders shaped the stones, workers repaired them, guards leaned against them during long watches. Children ran beside them while discovering the world around them. A castle is often remembered as a powerful object, but it is also a collection of memories. You move through the passages where ordinary people once walked each day. The smell of old wood remains near the doorways. The faint scent of smoke rises from fireplaces still burning against the winter chill. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echo through the halls, just as they did during the storm. Dover Castle is waking fully again. The workers have cleared paths. The kitchens have returned to their usual pace. The guards have resumed their regular duties. Life is moving forward. The history of Dover Castle records its importance as a royal fortress and a major defensive position along England's coast. Its location near the English Channel made it valuable for controlling movement between England and continental Europe, especially during periods of political uncertainty. But the meaning of the castle goes beyond strategy. A fortress is also shaped by the people who maintain it. You enter a chamber where workers are repairing small signs of winter damage. Their tools create quiet sounds against the materials they handle. A piece of wood is adjusted. A metal fitting is examined. A worn object receives attention instead of being abandoned. The work feels patient, almost peaceful. Medieval communities understood that survival depended on preservation. Objects, buildings, and resources were treated with care because replacing them was often difficult and expensive. A forgotten corner of medieval life reveals just how much attention people gave to repair. Many households relied on skilled craftspeople who extended the usefulness of clothing, tools, furniture, and equipment through careful maintenance. Repair was not a temporary solution, it was a way of life. You watch a worker carefully restoring an item that might appear ordinary. To someone centuries later, it may seem insignificant. Yet for the person who used it every day, it held practical importance. A repaired tool could complete work. A repaired garment could provide warmth. A repaired object could save valuable resources. The storm has reminded everyone inside Dover Castle that small things matter. You continue toward the upper levels, where the views across the landscape have begun to return. Snow remains in sheltered places, but the fields and roads are becoming visible again. The sea stretches beyond the cliffs. The sky opens above the fortress. The world feels larger than it did during the blizzard. You pause and imagine the residents looking out from these same heights. They would have watched for returning travellers, arriving ships, and signs of changing weather. The view connected them to places beyond the castle walls. Even during isolation, they were never completely disconnected. The available records leave some questions unanswered about how residents emotionally remembered severe winters. Historians can study buildings, supplies, and written accounts. But personal feelings are much harder to recover from the past. Did people remember the blizzard with fear? Did they remember the warmth of shared rooms? Did they tell stories about it years later? Perhaps the answer was different for every person. A soldier might remember the freezing nights on the walls. A servant might remember the endless work. A child might remember the beauty of the snow. A noble resident might remember the uncertainty of waiting. Everyone experienced the same event differently. You walk into a quieter room where fewer people pass through. The sunlight enters through a narrow opening, creating a soft golden line across the floor. Dust moves gently in the air. The room feels almost untouched. You imagine someone sitting here long ago, perhaps taking a brief moment away from daily duties. Medieval life involved constant responsibilities, but people still needed moments of rest and reflection. They listened, they thought, they remembered. An unexpected discovery from everyday medieval routines is how important personal connections were within large households. Although castles followed strict social structures, relationships between individuals often shaped daily experiences more than official titles did. A trusted worker could become important to a household. A loyal companion could become a source of comfort. A familiar face could make a cold fortress feel like home. You continue through the castle and think about all the different lives connected to this place. The guard who watched the sea, the cook who prepared meals, the servant who carried supplies, the child who explored the corridors, the worker who repaired damaged objects. Their names may be forgotten, but their experiences remain part of the castle's story. History often preserves the powerful, but ordinary people create the atmosphere of the past. Without them, Dover Castle would only be stone. You hear a fire crackling nearby and follow the sound. The warmth reaches you before the flames come into view. A few people gather close, sharing quiet conversation after completing their tasks. The scene feels familiar. It could have happened yesterday. People still seek warmth after difficult days. People still gather after challenges. People still find comfort in familiar spaces. The centuries between you and them suddenly feel smaller. You sit near the fire and listen to the sounds around you. The crackling flames, the quiet voices, the movement of people returning to their routines. The great blizzard has become a memory now, but memories shape places. They become part of the identity of a home. Dover Castle carries thousands of stories within its walls. Some are written in documents, some are discovered through archaeology. Others survive only through imagination and careful study. You leave the room and continue through the fortress, knowing that the people of 1217 were not simply surviving a storm. They were creating a moment that would outlast them. The snow outside will eventually disappear. The footsteps will eventually fade, the voices will eventually become silent, but the castle remains, and within its ancient stones, the quiet lives of those who endured the winter continue to echo. You step toward the highest parts of Dover Castle as the winter morning settles peacefully over the landscape. The great blizzard that once surrounded the fortress has become a memory, leaving behind quiet evidence of its power. The snow remains in small patches, the wind moves gently, the sea shines beneath the pale sky. From this height, you can finally see the world that was hidden during the storm. The cliffs return, the roads become visible again, the countryside stretches beyond the walls, reminding you that the castle was always connected to a much larger world. You stand there for a moment and think about everyone who lived inside these walls during that difficult winter. The soldiers, the servants, the cooks, the children, the workers, the nobles. Each person experienced the same fortress differently. A castle is never only one story. You walk slowly through the final corridors of your journey, noticing the details that reveal ordinary life. The worn steps show where people travelled every day. The darkened stones near fireplaces reveal where warmth was created. The quiet corners suggest where people paused, rested, and shared private moments. The castle remembers through its structure. The people who lived here left behind no complete record of their daily thoughts, but their routines can still be imagined through the spaces they occupied. The remains of medieval sites reveal that buildings like Dover Castle were designed not only for defence but also for living. They contained areas for work, storage, worship, administration, and family life because a fortress needed to support an entire community. You enter the Great Hall once more. The room feels familiar now. You recognize the sounds. You recognize the atmosphere. You can almost hear the conversations that filled this place during the storm. You can almost smell the meals prepared nearby. You can almost feel the warmth of the fire against the cold stone. The hall was where different worlds met. Here, important decisions may have been discussed. Here, meals were shared. Here, stories were exchanged. Here, people waited for the weather to change. A rarely mentioned part of castle life involved the emotional importance of familiar places. Rooms were not simply functional spaces. Over time, they became connected with memories, traditions, and personal experiences. A doorway could remind someone of a childhood moment. A fireplace could remind someone of a difficult winter survived. A hallway could remind someone of a person who once walked beside them. The Great Blizzard of 1217 was only one chapter in the long existence of Dover Castle. But for the people who experienced it, the storm would have been unforgettable. You imagine the years passing after that winter. Children who once watched the snow from the windows grew older. Workers who repaired the damage eventually moved on. Guards who stood on the walls were replaced by others. New generations entered the same rooms. The castle continued changing. The full story of every person who lived there remains impossible to recover. The surviving clues leave many personal experiences hidden, especially those of ordinary workers whose names were rarely recorded. Yet uncertainty does not make their lives less meaningful. In many ways, the unknown parts make the story more human. You think about the unnamed servant carrying firewood through frozen corridors. You think about the cook preparing meals while supplies were carefully managed. You think about the guard standing in the wind while watching the silent landscape. These people were not famous, they were not rulers, but they kept the fortress alive. You leave the great hall and walk toward the outer walls one final time. The air is cold but gentle now. The storm has lost its strength. Snow melts slowly where sunlight reaches the stones. The sound of dripping water replaces the roar of the wind. The smell of wet earth begins returning. The world is beginning again. A curious tradition from the medieval household world was the importance of seasonal rhythms. People often organized their activities around natural changes, adjusting work, celebrations, travel, and preparation according to the patterns of the year. Winter was not simply an obstacle. It was a season with its own rules. The people of Dover Castle understood this deeply. They knew when to prepare. They knew when to wait. They knew when to begin again. You look across the landscape and imagine the fortress as it appeared in 1217. The towers rise above the coast. The walls protect the people within. Smoke rises from fires. Animals move through the courtyards. Workers carry out familiar tasks. Life continues. That may be the greatest lesson hidden inside the story of this castle. Not every important moment is dramatic. Not every historical memory comes from battles or royal decisions. Sometimes history lives in quiet endurance. It lives in a warm meal prepared during a storm. It lives in a repaired piece of clothing. It lives in a candle burning through a dark evening. It lives in people helping each other continue. You walk away from the walls as the day grows brighter. The fortress remains behind you, standing above the sea just as it has for centuries. The blizzard has ended. The castle has rested. The people have carried on. And now, as the final echoes of this winter world begin to fade, you can let yourself leave Dover Castle behind, knowing that within those ancient stones were countless ordinary lives filled with courage, patience, and quiet moments of peace. The wind down begins here. You allow the image of the castle to become softer. The tall towers become distant shapes against the winter sky. The snowy paths become gentle lines of white. The sounds of footsteps and voices slowly disappear into the quiet of the evening. You imagine the fires glowing one last time inside the old rooms. You imagine the warmth spreading slowly across the stone. You imagine the people resting after their long days of work. Finally safe beneath the protection of the fortress walls, the sea below continues its calm movement. The clouds drift slowly above the cliffs. The castle remains peaceful. There's no need to hurry now. The winter storm has passed. The long nights have become memories. The old halls are quiet. You breathe slowly and picture yourself walking away from Dover Castle beneath a calm sky, carrying only the gentle feeling of a story that has come to rest. The voices of the past become softer. The candlelight becomes dimmer. The cold air becomes still. The ancient stones return to silence. And somewhere above the sleeping coastline, Dover Castle stands quietly, holding the memories of everyone who once called it home. Sleep well.